Was it easy? I thought you were breaking your bone. It's clipped, yeah?
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين أما بعد. So as we mentioned, today we'll start talking about fiqh of as-siyam, yani fiqh of fasting. Now, fasting, there's two types. There's that which is an obligation and that which is sunnah. Okay, so of the things to understand, what first and foremost, what is the meaning of as-sawm was-siyam? What is fasting by means of definition? And as we mentioned in the introduction, when it comes to a ta'rif definitions, we have lugha, al-ta'rif al-lugha or ta'rif al-istilah. The ta'rif according to the Arabic language, and then according to the istilah, the science of the scholars of that particular field. So, for example, you have meaning of sunnah according to the Arabic language, according to the science of hadith, according to the science of aqidah, according to the science of fiqh, holding from something, staying away from something, abstaining from something in general. And that's why they say, for example, the one who is quiet, who is silent, not saying any words, is considered to be sa'im. They have abstained from speaking. This is derived from where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions where he speaks about Maryam when she says Inni nadartu lirrahmani sawma. Now, where she mentions I have taken an oath with my Lord, with Ar-Rahman, fasting. But what does she mean here? Does she mean stay away from food? لا. فلا أكلم الناس or فلا أكلم اليوم إنسيا. So I'll not speak to any person today. I'll not speak to any mankind. She said she's not going to speak to anyone. So here she's abstaining from what? Speech, from talking. So this is a form of siyam, linguistically. As for fil istilah, according to the ulama of fiqh, what do they say? They mention إمساك بنية عن أشياء مخصوصة في زمن معين من شخص مخصوص. So this means that it is abstaining with intention from specific things. So you're staying away from specific things with the intention of staying away from it. في زمن معين, at a specific time. Okay? From a specific person. And some also add at-ta'abbud. Also say at-ta'abbud, why? To make it known that it is. So they will say, for example, that is one definition that's given. Another one they will say التعبد لله تعالى بالإمساك عن الأكل والشرب وسائر المفطرات من طلوع الفجر إلى غروب الشمس. So in this one it says it's an act of worship or worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by staying away from food and drink and all the other things that break one's fast, as we will come to mention within the sessions, from the time of Fajr until sunset. So from the rising of Fajr, from the break of dawn until sunset. So that is more specific. Food and drink and others will be underneath those specific things. Okay? For a specific time. Now here is highlighting the specific time. What is the specific time? من طلوع الفجر إلى غروب الشمس. From Fajr until sunset. And that is from a specific person. We will highlight within the studies who has to fast, who is excused from fasting, and the likes. Also, of the things that is mentioned, is, when was fasting made an obligation? When did fasting become obligatory upon the Muslims? Who knows? The second year of Hijrah. And Ibn Hajar, in his explanation of Arba'in, he says it was in Sha'ban, in the month of Sha'ban, in the second year of Hijrah. That's when it was made obligatory upon the Muslims to fast. And I mentioned bil ijma', by consensus, that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ fasted 9 Ramadans. He fasted 9 Ramadans. Also, of the things mentioned, what is the reason for obligation of Siyam? So, what is the cause of Siyam being an obligation? The seeing of the what? The moon, the crescent moon, the new moon, the hilal. In Arabic it's called al-hilal, the new moon. So when a person sees the new moon, this is sabab al-wujub. So this is the reason for it being an obligation to fast. So when you do not see that, it's not what? An obligation to fast. It's not an obligation to fast until the new moon has been seen. And that is taken from when Allah SWT mentions, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ. So whoever witnesses from you the month, then let him fast it. Now, the month, you're not seeing the month itself. What are you seeing? Alamatul shahr al-jadid, the sign of a new month, and that is the hilal, the new moon. Also, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned, Sumu liru'yatihi. You see that malfunction when you have to do 2 languages. We have to learn Arabic. Okay, we have to learn Arabic. Sumu liru'yatihi wa aftiru liru'yatihi. He mentioned this hadith, fast for when you see the moon, when you see it. The ru'yatihi, the damir is going back to al-hilal. So you fast when you see it, and you also stop fasting, you break your fast when you see it. Now, me myself, I'm not going to open the door to any discussion of the contemporary issues that happen every single year of who we follow. I'm going to say what I read and what I've seen and what I follow and what I'll tell others to follow. In the UK especially, in the 80s or even maybe before then, the main institutes of Islam, the masajid, the main masajid, they met, the heads of them, they met, and they decided that they will follow Saudi Arabia because it's not far off, the moon cycle is not far off from us. So everyone was doing that. Everyone had agreed that they were going to follow Saudi Arabia. When they announced that the new moon has been sighted in this Ramadan, they would follow them. If they didn't announce it, they would complete the month, they would follow them. You find those who come and say, no, I want to follow my country, I want to follow my country, I want to follow my country. And what it does, it causes disunity among the Muslims. So what is awla, كما قال الشيخ bin Baz and Sheikh Uthaymeen rahmatullah alayhim, is that the Muslims follow one. That is what is best. So I encourage and I stand strongly for following when the Saudi Arabia announces it, especially for Eid al-Adha also, the days of Hajj. Especially for the days of Hajj. For us in the West, I'm not talking about people outside of the West, I'm talking about for us in the UK. As for people in other places, that's not my concern. Nor is that our concern, because we don't live there. Our concern is where we are. Okay? And not to follow minorities who want to cause difference. Also, when it comes to the sighting of the moon, what is the method? Because ar-ru'ya bil-ayn. Ru'ya is seeing something with one's eye. So the Hisab al-Falaki, which is like the astronomical calculations, I think that's what it's referred to as. This is not something that we use. We don't use this. This is not used at all. As for telescopes and the likes, then they are permissible to be used. Why? Because it's just mukabbiratul ayn. It just makes what the eye can see bigger. You see, it makes what the eye can see bigger. But as for what is called al-hisab al-falaki, then this is not to be used. We don't depend on this, we don't rely upon this. And I remember some of the ulama mentioned there were some countries that relied upon hisab al-falaki rather than the seeing of the eye, and they miscalculated by 2-3 days. They started Ramadan early by 2-3 days. Why? Because they're following hisab al-falaki, which is calculation that they use, these particular tools, devices, that they take a number of pictures of the moon at different cycles, and they try to make a calculation of when it's going to be. Islam is easy. And you actually find, if you watch the video of those who try to sight the moon, it's not just anyone. Nowadays, you find it's credible people that are sighting the moon. Specialists also. So this is not something to be taken lightly. And the issue is, why do we have this issue? Because we cannot see the moon here. We cannot witness the moon where we are. The way we are with the horizon, the way we are located, our position on the earth, it doesn't allow us to see the moon. Also, of the things that are discussed, the stages that fasting itself was made an obligation, the different stages of fasting. So at first, the first stage of fasting was that it was obligatory to fast Yawm al-Ashura. The first fasting that was an obligation was fasting of Yawm Ashura. Now, and that is in the Sahihain, and Ashra anha kana Yawm Ashura tasumuhu قريش في الجاهلية وكان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يصومه فلما قدم المدينة صامه وأمر بصيامه فلما نزل رمضان كان رمضان فريضة وترك عاشوراء فكان من شاء صامه ومن شاء لم يصم. So in Sahihain it mentions that the day of Ashura, the Quraysh in the days of Jahiliyyah, the days of ignorance. Jahiliyyah means the days before Islam. So the days of ignorance, before they were upon Islam. Sometimes people use this term to say basically the days I wasn't practicing La. It's the days before you were a Muslim. The days of ignorance, before Islam came to you. That is Jahiliyyah, prior Islam. Okay? Also, so the Quraysh used to fast this day in the days of Jahiliyyah, before Islam. And the Prophet Muhammad used to also fast this day. So when he came to Medina, he fasted the day of Ashura, and he commanded the Muslims to fast this day. So it was an obligation to fast Yawm al-Ashura. When is Yawm al-Ashura? The 10th day of Muharram. The 10th day of Muharram. But then she mentioned in this hadith, when Ashura was left, no longer an obligation. So this is the example of an abrogation within the Quran. At the time, it was obligatory to fast Ashura. When Allah revealed the fasting of Ramadan, fasting Ashura was abrogated as being an obligation. And it became a practice of sunnah. Whoever wanted to do it, they did it. Whoever doesn't want to fast, you don't fast. You're not sinful if you don't do it. But before, if you didn't do it, you'd be considered what? Sinful, because you left off an obligation. So, the second stage of fasting was فرض الصيام رمضان مع التخيير بين الصيام والإطعام. The next stage of fasting, when Ramadan became obligatory, you had a choice. You can either fast or you can feed the poor. You had a choice. So in the first days, that's why it mentions وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٍ فَمَنْ تَطَوَّعَ خَيْرًا فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ وَأَنْ تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. So here, they were given a choice. Within this ayah, when it was revealed about Siyam, fasting Ramadan, there was a choice. So whoever had the ability and they were able to fast, then they had a choice of ransoming that with giving of food, feeding the poor and the needy. And whoever did anything of voluntary actions, and that was of good, and he volunteered anything good, then that is better for him. But here it mentions, وَأَن تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. Fasting is better for you. Yeah, fasting is better for you if you know. So here, they were given a choice. At this stage, when fasting Ramadan was revealed as an obligation, with ikhtiyar. You either fast or you feed the needy. The third stage...
Sorry, can I ask?
No.
Is it without a condition that you're not married or the child?
As we said,
So,
it's general.
so
You either fast or you feed the needy.
Okay.
It's general,
also,
just with choice. Take it as it is. Okay, that's the second stage, with choice. So nothing's been mentioned about sick or anyone. Just when it came in the second stage, fasting, you have a choice. You either fast or you feed. You have a choice. It's got nothing to do with sick or anything else. Traveling, la. You just have a choice.
the ayah that
But this no just obligation. Fasting Ramadan. At this point, it was a choice. You either fast or you feed the poor. There's no conditions. You have a choice. Now we get to the third stage. The third stage is فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ. Whoever witnesses the month from among you, then let him fast. So now the choice has been abrogated. There's no more choice. So as the first stage was, you had to fast what? Ashura. And then that was abrogated with Ramadan. Fasting of Ramadan. Where now fasting Ashura became a choice. You either did it or you didn't do it. You had a choice. But then with Ramadan, you also had a choice. You either have to fast or instead of fasting, you have to feed someone. You have to feed. Then at this stage, the third stage, then you had to fast the month of Ramadan. Also, so what is mentioned here now, as we mentioned, of the signs of wujub, or what makes it wajib to fast is again what? Remind me? Seeing the new moon, ru'yat al-hilal. And that is because the same ayah that we have mentioned, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ. Also the hadith of Abi Hurairah and Sahihain. It's in both Bukhari and Muslim. أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال صوموا لرؤيته وأفطروا لرؤيته فإن غبي عليكم فأكملوا عدة شعبان 30. So it mentions you fast when you see the new moon, you break your fast when you see the new moon. But if you're not able to, if it's been concealed from you, either by way of clouds, fog, or anything that prevents you from being able to see the sky clear, that you're able to see the new moon, then what are you to do? La.
finish the 30 days.
You finish the 30 days. Now, in the books of fiqh, it mentions that Ibn Umar would fast that day. Ibn Umar, if, for example, the night of 29th night, they were not able to see, he would fast the next day. If it was cloudy, you have those that is mentioned that some of the Sahaba did this. However, because of the umum al-adillah, the general evidences that mentioned, the strongest thing to do is what? Not to fast, because you don't want to fast the day of shak. That you fast the day of doubt. And it's considered that if you cannot see, then it becomes a day of doubt. But them fasting was not out of them doing it in terms of doubt, it was al-ihtiyat. Al-ihtiyat, yani, like safeguarding oneself, as a prevention. How would you translate ihtiyat? Precaution, now. As a precaution. Allah musta'an. When you learn Arabic, you forget English. But it's good, I like it. I'd prefer to forget English, alhamdulillah. But yeah, so as a precaution, because they would say, I'd rather fast a day that wasn't Ramadan than be eating, not in a state of fasting, and it was Ramadan. However, Shaykh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, and other than him, mentioned that what is correct is that you do not fast because of this hadith also. So even with the books of fiqh, they mention this hadith, but they don't mention the part where it says, فَإِنْ غُبِّ عَلَيْكُمْ فَأَكْمِلُوا عِدَّةَ شَعْبَانَ 30. What they do mention is فَإِنْ غُمَّ عَلَيْكُمْ فَقَدِرُوا لَهُ. Now, so it mentions if it is, if you're not able to see it, then calculate or restrict the month. And they interpret it to mean restrict the month. ضيقوا شعبان 29, that you make it 29 days. However, Shaykh Uthaymeen, he mentions the meaning of that statement is إكمال شعبان 30 يوما, is that you complete the month of Sha'ban as 30 days. You can, if you're not able to see it, complete the month as 30 days. No. Also, when it comes to emphasizing that we do not fast the day that has doubt, is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. He mentions لا تقدموا رمضان بصوم يوم ولا يومين إلا رجل كان يصوم صوما فليصم. It mentions, do not precede the Ramadan with a day or two, fasting with a day or two, except for a person that it was his normal practice to fast those days. Who can give me an example? Monday and Thursday.
Every other day.
3 white days.
Every other day, the best.
Siyam Dawood. No. So if this was your norm to fast, but let's say, for example, I haven't fasted the whole of Sha'ban, and then it's the 29th day and I fast this day, then this is the one who's falling into this hadith. By fasting a day out of doubt, to miss Ramadan. Like, we work upon yaqeen, certainty. So here, because it mentions another hadith in the Tirmidhi, and it's said to be Hasan, hadith Hasan, it mentions, Man sama yawm al-shak faqad asa Abul Qasim. Whoever fasts the day of doubt, then he has disobeyed Abul Qasim, i.e. the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So that's of the things regarding when a person actually starts the month, fasting the month of Ramadan. Also, of the things that is mentioned, if someone sees the moon during the daytime, is that for the day before or the day after, the coming night? Of what is mentioned, when it comes to sighting of the moon, it has to occur after Maghrib. After Maghrib. So it shouldn't be, because sometimes you see the moon and it's broad daylight. At the time of Dhuhr, you're looking up, you see the moon. Okay? But that's not for you to act upon this to say, yeah, it means this is the moon that we sighted. La. It's the sighting of the moon after Ghurub al-Shams, after Maghrib. Also, of the things that is mentioned, what are the conditions when it comes to sighting the moon? What are the conditions when it comes to sighting the moon? So of the things that is mentioned, تثبت رؤية هلال بخبر مسلم مكلف عدل ولو عبدا أو أنثى. So it mentions in this book of fiqh, it mentions that the sighting of the moon is affirmed by news of a Muslim, mukallaf is one who is of the age where they are responsible for their actions. Adlin, it means adl in this context. It doesn't just mean just. Adl in this context, it means the one who is mustaqim, who is upright, who is not known for falling into major sins, and he's not known for being persistent in minor sins. This is what is meant by al-adl. In this context, al-adl, al-adala in this context is someone who does not fall into major sins. They are upright, they fulfill the obligations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon them, and they are not persistent, they don't consistently fall into minor sins. And what is also mentioned, whether they are a slave or a female. Now, this is something that there's difference of opinion in. You will find amongst the scholars of fiqh, they have difference of opinion. Rather, is it sufficient to have one shahid, one witness, or do we need more than one? Okay. Now, according to the madhab of, and the hadith that is used, which is hadith that is authentic, is the hadith of Ibn Umar رضي الله عنهما. قال تراءى الناس الهلال فأخبرت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أني رأيته فصامه وأمر الناس بصيامه. So here he mentions, and his hadith is in Abu Dawud, he mentions that Ibn Umar said, the people were looking for the moon, so I informed the Messenger of Allah that I had seen the moon. So he fasted from my sighting of the moon, and he commanded the people to also fast. And from this we see that how many people was a witness? One. So those who say it's sufficient for one person to be a witness to sight the moon for the beginning of Ramadan, then they use this hadith that is mentioned. Also, another hadith that is used, but the hadith is da'if. The hadith is da'if, it's not authentic, but of the things that they mention that they use as for those who said that you can base witness, is that Arabi Ja'il al-Nabi sallallahu a Bedouin came to the Prophet sallallahu, he said that I saw the moon. Then the Prophet sallallahu said to him, do you bear witness that there's none worthy of worship in truth? He said, Allah, atashhadu an la ilaha illallah. He said, Na'am. فقال أتشهد أن محمد رسول الله. Do you bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah? He said, Na'am. فقال يا بلال أذن في الناس فليصوموا غدا. He said, announce to the people that they should fast from tomorrow. But the hadith is not authentic من جهة الإسناد. And what is mentioned in explanation of this hadith, regarding why this hadith fihi nadar, especially that it's not authentic, of the things that we mentioned of the conditions is that the person is to be what? Adil, to have a udul, yani adala, that there's someone who is known to not be someone who's a major sinner, not persistent in minor sins, trustworthy and upright. This was a Bedouin that was not known to anyone. So there was no thubut of adala, there was no affirmation of his adala. It was a random Bedouin who came. That's why he asked, do you bear witness that there's no worship in truth except Allah? He asked him basically if he was a Muslim. Okay, but this hadith is da'if anyway. But it was mentioning among all of the other Sahaba who are there, who are thiqat, udul, that this was the one who was narrating this situation before them. You also have those who say labud min shahidain fa akthar. You have those who say it's a must that there are 2 witnesses or more. And that's based on the general hadith of Abdurrahman ibn Zayd ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, that he mentions فَإِن شَهِدَ شَاهِدًا فَسُومُوا وَأَفْطِرُوا. and he mentions witness basically the new moon, then fast and break your fast. And the hadith is mentioned to be sahih. And all the things mentioned is that this hadith is general, but it also includes the month of Ramadan. It's in general for any fasting, but it includes the month of Ramadan. Now, the third, and that is with, for example, the Malikiya, they say you have to have two witnesses. Those who follow the Imam Malik in the Maliki madhab, they say you have to have two witnesses. The third, regarding witnessing of the moon, is that it's sufficient to have one witness if in the sky there's some form of deficiency, such as clouds, dust, and the likes. But I say if the sky is clear, then there needs to be a group. And that is the madhab of the Ahnaf, the Hanafi madhab. They have this opinion. If there's clouds and the sky is not clear, they say it's sufficient to have one witness. But if the sky is clear, they say you have to have a large gathering. You have to have a large gathering that will witness. So they mention, because if the sky is clear, then السماء إذا كانت سهوا فتفرد الشاهد الواحد يورث الشك في صحة شهادته بخلاف ما إذا كانت بالسماء. What they mention is that if a person is by themselves in a clear sky, then they may be in a doubt. It's easier for them to have doubt. Whereas if it was not clear sky, then they're less likely to be doubtful. So regarding when the sky is clear, then they have to have a big group. And they mention regarding the big group, some of the things that's mentioned within their madhab is that it has to be 10 or more. However, what seems to be more authentic regarding the madhab, check your phone's ringing, is that it's a large enough group that allows you to affirm ghalabat al-dhann, which is like near certainty. It's not certainty, but it's a level before this, that you're able to say there's a higher percentage of those that can affirm the truthfulness. As for what this Shaykh he says is the strongest opinion, is the second. And that mentions the second opinion of the Maliki madhab is two parts to it. So basically, if you're in a place, yu'tana, that is based upon the sighting of the moon, that place, the specific location, then you have to have two witnesses. But if you're in a place that is not from the places that rely upon the sighting of the moon, and someone comes by themselves and tells you that they've seen the moon, then it's sufficient to have one witness. But if you're in a place where they can able to see the moon and sight the moon, you need witnesses. That's the Maliki madhab. That's of the thing, and I mentioned because of the second hadith mentioned of Abdurrahman ibn Zayd ibn al-Khattab radhiyallahu anhum is am, and he's general and combines between also Ramadan. And as the hadith of the Arabi is da'if, that mentions the one shahid is da'if. Also, what is mentioned, as for the hadith of Ibn Umar, radiallahu anhum, the Prophet Muhammad sufficed him with his witnessing. There's nothing to say that no one else witnessed it with him. There's nothing that mentions that no one else saw it with him. But within what is mentioned in the hadith, that Ibn Umar says he saw it and the Prophet accepted it from him. But within the hadith, there's nothing that indicates that he was the only one who witnessed it. Also, of the things that is mentioned, because it was Ibn Umar, who was known for his precision and also his high level of fear of Allah Azza wa Jal, and that he was precise in making sure that he strove to get things correct, because he was from the Sahaba, of the most knowledgeable of the Sahaba, known for ijtihad. That because it was him, and the Prophet knew him for these characteristics, this is also of the thing that is mentioned as the reasoning but why in that circumstance it was accepted from him, that the possibility of only him being the one who saw it. But it also mentions that the likes occurred with Khuzaymah ibn Thabit, also from the Sahaba, who was known to the Prophet Muhammad, that he was also one person who witnessed it, and the Prophet accepted it from him. And the change of times, because you find the people today were not of the level of practice of Islam as they were before, especially when it comes in the bab of adala. In the bab of adala, those who are upright and mustaqim, no one can really vouch for anyone. We vouch based on the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows a person's condition. But as for the time of the Sahaba, there was no ta'an fi Sahaba. And kullu Sahaba udul. All of the Sahaba are udul. They are trustworthy and of that level of istiqamah. As for other than them, then this is when you find a lot of these differences of opinions come. You have those who say, of the things that's mentioned, those who say sufficient is one witness, and those who say you need two. Those who say you need two. But as for you, as an individual, and myself, general people, then we'll follow that which the majority of the Muslims are upon within our locality. If you're in a land that is governed by the Muslims, then you'll follow the one who's in charge of the Muslims, like this. But this is just to give you an insight of the things that I discussed regarding these matters of establishing that the month of Ramadan has actually started. And it also shows you al-inayat al-shara', the concern that is given to important matters within Islam. The acts of worship are not taken lightly. That there are conditions to be established and followed to make sure a person is worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the correct way, in the best way. And this makes a person actually appreciate knowledge and appreciate Islam. Rather than you have those, for example, like the Nasara, who do actions with no guidance. They guess, they do anything that their whims and desires tell them to do that they think is going to be pleasing to one who created them. And this is not the way of the Muslim. Rather, the Muslim upon clear knowledge. If we can just ponder over the matter of witnessing the moon, seeing the moon, and the discussions that is had, and the due diligence of the people of knowledge that are given to following the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad in establishing the times that the different acts of worship are to be established. And also makes us have respect for people of knowledge. Because if we didn't have this, then everyone would consider themselves to be on the same level, and the disputes that we have will be even more. As I mentioned, you have just alone in the West, the amount of arguments people have based on who are they following for Ramadan has become of contemporary times, and it's never going to stop. Every single year, the same questions are going to be asked. Who should we follow? Every single year. So no one can say, oh, but this person said, and then you're going to say, but this person said, but this person said. Just leave it. The best thing is to leave it and follow what they established. It would be the way that they would follow within the UK, for example, and you continue that way. Don't follow the smaller minorities, because many times, and mal asaf, many times people say things because they just want to be different. And they want to follow their home country from back home. They're here, but they want to follow their home country. But if you was in a country, you was living in a place, and they were upon a different way, then of the things mentioned, for example, if it was known that the moon has been sighted, but that country is not following that, but it's established the moon has been sighted, then you do not break your fast openly of the things discussed. You break your fast in secret. You break your fast in secret. If the moon has been sighted, for example, for the end of Ramadan, you break your fast in secret. But of the things that a person should bear in mind is, in all of these affairs, you go back to the people of knowledge. You go back to the people of knowledge, they'll give you clear guidance in how you should function as a Muslim, especially in Muslim minority countries. And also when you're in a country where you may have relocated and the likes, and the majority madhab is not the madhab you follow. It's not the madhab or understanding you follow. But again, you'll be given guidance within those circumstances and how you should function therein. So, of the things mentioned regarding the conditions of witnessing or any for the witness, then there are 3 conditions. The first is they have to be Muslim, they have to be someone who's baligh and aqil, reached the age of maturity and is sane. And thirdly, they have to be adil, someone who is trustworthy and upright. Someone who is trustworthy and upright. Also, he mentioned that even if they are a slave, if they have those characteristics have been mentioned, that they're Muslim and they're baligh, aqil and trustworthy, then their shahada will be accepted. And it's mentioned regarding a woman, her witness is accepted because of the general evidences mentioned. What is mentioned though, as for the other months, other than Ramadan, then there has to be 2 witnesses. 2 witnesses, 2 male witnesses, as mentioned in the hadith, فَإِن شَهِدَ شَاهِدًا فَصُومُوا وَأَفْطِرُوا. There has to be 2 witnesses in those situations. And also, what is mentioned, the qawl al-rajih, and this is the opinion of Sheikh Sa'ad Khatlan, who's one of the scholars from the Hayat al-Kibar, who has a very new explanation of a book called Dalil al-Talib, that's very good. He's a senior scholar in fiqh. He mentions the qawl al-rajih regarding even Ramadan is that if you're in a place that is somewhat dependent upon sighting of the moon, then you have to have 2 witnesses also. And that is the opinion of the Maliki madhab. But he also mentions that that is the correct opinion. So you have those discussions. To be honest, do you have to really worry about it here? Not so much, no. But it's good to have knowledge. A person should never be satisfied with ignorance. It's good to have knowledge, but these are discussions that are had. And why I like to mention sometimes, because not always we mention the difference of opinion, but sometimes is because you start to appreciate it's based upon evidence. It's not just based off whim and desire. So when we do have differences, it should be based upon evidence. That you look at the evidence presented, and also how do you understand what is the stronger opinion based on the authenticity of the evidence presented? And also, this is fiqh we're studying, but you also have usul of fiqh. Usul of fiqh is a science that allows you to understand the evidences and how they are used as applied before we get to the stage of giving the fiqh ruling. So, for example, you hear terms mentioned that say this is this is general. So, how do you understand the relationship to some evidences being general, some being specific, and understanding these terms? That's what allows you to understand who has the stronger evidence for the case that they present. And that's what so that's of the things that is mentioned regarding the beginning of Ramadan and the obligation of Ramadan. And inshallah ta'ala, we'll start to talk about in the next lesson the things that will break the fast. The kinds of things that break the fast, inshallah ta'ala. We'll talk about those things, inshallah. As I mentioned, if you have questions about specific things regarding this, then you have to write it down. It's not to be asked in the class. You write it down and it will be answered in the beginning of the next lesson, inshallah. طيب. Any questions on anything I mentioned today? If I didn't mention it, you can't ask. طيب.
You said that there's a da'if hadith, and then you said it was da'if, and you said it's unauthentic. But
That unauthentic English translation, weak.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So weak now. So if it's da'if, it's not authentic.
Okay.
No. Da'if means the hadith is weak. Okay. And it can be weak from two angles. Either the matan, the wording of the hadith, or the isnad, which is the people who have narrated the hadith, the chain of narration. And that's a whole science in itself as for why. There may be many reasons why. You see. You might have something that is shadh as well. When, for example, one hadith might mention something different, but he's also authentic, he's trustworthy. But what he mentions is different to everyone who's stronger than him and more trustworthy than him, for example. And these kind of things. So when you realize this knowledge is an ocean, you really appreciate it. Because imagine if you had to do that work, you had to go and find out now, is the hadith da'if, how is it da'if, why is it da'if? Then start discussing the rules extracted from it. You see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose some of His ibad to do this job and preserve the religion. And from the gratitude that we can show is benefiting from it and referring back to it and preserving it and sharing it, inshallah ta'ala. Any other questions? طيب. But also, this is a reminder, general fiqh questions, don't ask me. In general, because I am far from a mufti. Like, far from it. And there's so much avenues you can use to ask for fatwa. And you'll find if you search the right channels, Islam Q&A and those other websites,